Welcome to Galaxy Brains. We're here this week with a great episode. I'm not in the studio, so no intro rap this week, but we have a great interview with Will Foxley, host of the Mining Pod, formerly of Compass Mining. I'll talk with Will about Bitcoin mining, media in the crypto landscape. He's been involved in media at CoinDesk and elsewhere for a long time, and it's a great discussion. Of course, we'll also check in with our good friend Beimnet Abebe from Galaxy Trading, as always, to talk markets. But before we get to all of that, I need to remind you to please refer to the link to the disclaimer in the podcast notes, and note that none of the information in this podcast constitutes investment advice or an offer, recommendation, or solicitation by Galaxy Digital or any of its affiliates to buy or sell any securities. It's an interesting convo here with Will Foxley. Again, like I said, he's been involved in crypto media for a long time. He has a lot of interesting ideas and critiques about how media can improve covering this space. So let's hop right into it. Let's go now to our friend Beimnet Abebe from Galaxy Trading. As always, Beimnet, great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
So we're not in the office. Actually, you're in the office. I'm not in the office, so that's why we look a little different here.
You know, I blame Alex for this. I'm an office guy 7 days a week. You know, 24 hours a day. I live and
never
breathe.
Sleep.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they never sleep. So you've been talking a lot over the last couple of weeks, and I know it's still relevant in your mind about the U.S. Treasury curve.
Absolutely.
And so let's start there. Where does it stand now in your mind?
30-year yields are testing the highs again today, around 430 to 435. And we've seen tests of new, year-to-date highs, across all of fixed income here in the U.S. And so I still think that you're likely going to see the back end of the curve continue to steepen, relative to the front end, and that those nominal yields are going to have to rise, and a rise of call it 25 to 50 basis points on either the 10-year part of the curve or the 30-year part of the curve, with the front end staying constant, still takes you to neg 25 basis points ish of inversion. And so I think there's still tons of room for the back end to sell off. And fundamentally, there's nothing in the supply demand picture that I think is going to change to alter that view in any way. Long story short, the government is deficit spending like crazy, and the central banks are no longer buying fixed income on their balance sheet. And so all the supply has got to get absorbed, and that the buyer base to absorb this supply is shrinking by the day. And so, I think path least resistance is higher than U.S. back-end yields, and that's going to weigh on risk sentiment, and already has. You've seen the NASDAQ trade off significantly again today. We had a down 1% day yesterday, and so and we're meaningfully off the highs at this point. So you're definitely seeing that spillover impact into traditional markets and equities. In FX, dollar's been rallying. Dollar yen is in currency intervention territory. It's almost trading at 146. The last time we were here, obviously the BOJ had to step in, and that's largely again a function of the U.S. stuff, but also of the BOJ policy, which is really not doing much in the way of tightening monetary policy. And so, I really think the setup's there for higher U.S. rates, lower U.S. equities, and probably a stronger dollar over the next handful of months.
So crypto in this landscape, and I feel like we're almost beating a dead horse because volatility has been so low. I think Bitcoin realized volatility is essentially at the lowest ever. I ran it yesterday on Tuesday.
It might as well be.
Yeah, and it was the 37th
You're splitting hairs here. It's in one of those low percentiles. It volves low, and I think that is justified because one, in theory, the more this asset class matures, the lower vol profile it's going to have. You don't want Bitcoin trading at 100 vol if you think it's going to be a store of value asset. You want it periodically rallying, but it shouldn't be an insane vol asset if you're trying to attract $1 trillion of capital into that asset. And so, one, I wouldn't be oh my God, there's no interest, there's no activity, because I would just say that it might actually help the long-term kind of narrative and the profile of the asset class. Two, outside of this, I think you've highlighted it, on some of the pieces you've written, but, this grayscale stuff, we were expecting the decision on Tuesday, didn't happen, might get it on Friday. But outside of that, I don't see much of I don't see many near-term positive catalysts. And even if you were to get the ETF approval, it's like, one of those things where you actually need that approval and that product to actually be available to see the impact. The amount of impact you're going to get from, folks speculating on the approval, like there's a limit to that. And I think we've already hit that limit in terms of just like in the conversation of ideas, just saturating the thought process around the ETF, et cetera. And you've had retail, buy tons of, Bitcoin-related equities, all that. So people loaded up on the ETF narrative already. And so I think, like, until you actually get to the event where institutions that are comfortable with the BlackRock ETF, like, can actually buy it in the open market and you can see that flow, like, it's going to be tough for us to rally based on this ETF narrative. Outside of, if you get this grayscale win, I think you could get a nice little pop. But I'm kind of struggling to see what would justify, prices being higher or vol being more elevated.
Yep. I saw a headline on Bloomberg. It says, Bitcoin volatility vanishes amid, quote, extreme apathy and exhaustion. I was chuckling about this a little bit because, Bitcoin at 30K, I just don't consider to be extreme apathy. Maybe I'm taking too long a view in Bitcoin's life cycle. But it is absent. I mean, we had that step up on the BlackRock ETF announcement, which was mid-June. Yeah. And we've basically just been sideways since then.
Yeah, I think it's also good that it's not going down aggressively, right? We've had tons of macro assets, come down, commodities come down in the past couple of weeks, et cetera. The fact that it's holding in okay with, the broader market and even alts getting hosed, I think is a sign that, folks that bought it on the ETF narrative, they're not, some of them were the leveraged, crazy, really aggressive, like hedge fund type buying, the weekend type of buying. But a lot of it, kind of seems to be like a very institutional-esque sort of buyer base. Not necessarily institutions, but retail with a much longer like investing horizon. And so, I do think that you can see that in the price action that folks aren't really panicking to sell this stuff because they know that in, whether it's 6 months from now or a year from now, this product is going to have that institutional moment.
I think your point about flows makes a lot of sense as it relates to the ETF. You have the narrative, right, which is a lot of speculation, but then in terms of this specific type of headline, if it comes to pass, it is one that creates a new avenue for flows to come into the industry, right? So you get the narrative speculation around its approval and then its launch, but then Bitcoin can start trading even more like a macro asset because it becomes available to so many more types of investors. And then you can see the structural flows occur and it becomes more of a flow story over a narrative story at that point.
Exactly. And I think the flow story is really what matters, right? And the flows, like if we're even on the most conservative end, like the amount of assets that, Bitcoin is going to attract via an ETF product, I think is, underestimated by the market. I may be wrong there. I think folks have done the GLD comparison and, folks have, some bullish outcomes. But in theory, the way I think about it is like, okay, let's say an ETF launched today. I think Bitcoin would be well through 40K. Like easily well.
Yeah, I mean it reduces the
50.
risk.
Yeah, and so like you don't see that kind of like flow impact in the market or that expected flow impact, quite yet.
Yeah, it reduces the risk for traditional wealth managers, RIAs, other types of investors. They no longer have to consider it as the separate thing that needs bespoke custody and you can't track the prices without going to weird crypto websites, right? it sits right there next to all the other ETF options that they can offer their clients. And so it definitely at least becomes a bigger part of the conversation when it comes to portfolio allocation in the event that ETF becomes live.
Yeah. And then, I always have to say this, every day the argument for Bitcoin gets stronger from a monetary standpoint. I mean, just look at the, shadow banking crisis in China for the time being. You've got, formerly their largest property developer that, their bonds are now frozen. The PBOC is now cutting interest rates again. Japan had gangbusters GDP, but they can't get off of negative interest rates in their front end, and they can't even get to 1% yet on their 10-year note. And the Fed is telling you that, they're likely pausing, and I think the market is, that there's going to be a limit to how much the yield curve can steepen, and I think there's going to be a call on the Fed at some point. Anyway, not getting there, but the monetary arguments between now and when the ETF launches, I think, are going to only be stronger in the sense that, either we'll have gone through some financial market havoc that, will make us more inclined for easier monetary policy, or the data will have just slowed down by then where, you can, actually cut interest rates or foresee, the Fed cutting, et cetera. But by and large, it kind of seems like the hawkish tilt that you've had among central banks over the past, call it 12 to 18 months, you're on the last legs of that. And it kind of goes to show you the limits of monetary policy and fiscal and like it's just like every day it's like, wait, the government wants to have a near record deficit even though we have an inflation problem. Like just these such obvious things. Wait, we're gonna give UPS labor drivers a huge raise, and the UK labor market that everybody's getting raises like crazy, and people are like, how are you going to fight inflation when you're giving people like 5-6% raises? Like, wait, what is that going to lead to? More consumption, higher prices. And so the logical, extensions of where monetary and fiscal policy, can get to, ultimately are always going to be, pro Bitcoin or hard assets. And I think, over the next 6 months, you'll see a much stronger case play out.
Yeah. There's a cognitive dissonance there between the inflation and the various policies. Look, let's wrap it there. We could go on and on, my friend. Beimnet Abebe from Galaxy Trading, as always. Thank you so much for joining Galaxy Brains.
Pleasure.
Welcome, Will Foxley, our guest, formerly of Compass Mining. I'm really excited to get into what you're doing next and talk with you. Welcome to Galaxy Brains, Will.
Thanks, Alex. Also friends. We
can
start
true.
there.
That's true.
It's true.
Two podcasters yucking it up. Will's got a great podcast, by the way, The Mining Pod, which he's done for a long time. And also, you're still on CoinDesk TV, right? The Hash?
I am. Been doing that almost 3 years now.
I know. It's been a long time.
Yeah. It's one of the longer running shows in crypto.
It is. And that's, if I may say so, by far the best CoinDesk TV show of those shows.
Put a lot of work into it.
And, well, you guys have real production, which is, like, really interesting. Like, I've gone on CoinDesk TV before.
Have you gone to the office?
No, but I've gone on. I've never actually gone live. That would be – I like doing TV live much better. Like, I've done Bloomberg TV a couple times, and I much prefer to go up to their studio.
Yeah.
It's just better.
Oh, I've seen you there.
Yeah. But they have, like, it's a very professional operation from a TV production side. No, Bloomberg is no green screen at all.
So, like, all that
weird, like, flashy, like, it's built. It's actually beautiful.
Really?
I mean, CoinDesk must be all green screen, right? I mean,
yeah. So they have like you should definitely go in sometime. It's like a small TV setup, almost like a local news channel.
Yeah.
And they have a whole production room. But it's cool for crypto because, like, typically you wouldn't have the money to be able to do that.
Well, let's talk about this actually because I know we wanted to talk about this. Let's go right into media. We're going to talk about your background, Will, and how you got involved, how you got at CoinDesk, how you got into mining. Like we'll talk about that stuff too. But while we're on this, let's talk about media in crypto because it is the only CoinDesk TV is the only like TV show
besides
TV channel. Yeah, BitBoy Ben Armstrong, that's his name.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a fan, but at all. But he has a lot of listen. But that's not a TV show, is it? I guess it is.
I think it is.
It's just not just like a live stream.
I think he's one of the pure pundits out there.
Yeah.
Might not like him, but he is.
He has a big audience, right?
Pomp has moved that way too on purpose, I think.
Yeah,
I don't think he had
is
to be.
Pomp still doing his thing? He did the Best Business Show.
So he kind of changed from, and we can talk about this too, like sponsorship stuff. After so much blowback from BlockFi and so many other sponsors, he's like not doing that anymore. And so he moved to a different model. And it seems like they're doing like sort of stand-up classes, almost like a master class thing.
Interesting.
They did that with mining recently, and it was pretty good. I mean, just kind of bringing like the mining CEOs.
Yeah.
Get a lot of people who would listen because they buy their mining stock. So that's one model. But I mean, they still have the newsletter. I think they still have the podcast.
Right.
They're not doing the daily show that they did with the brothers, which
That was the Best Business Show. That was like peak COVID type stuff.
Yeah.
That was. Remember when Dave Portnoy was doing his live Twitter stream?
Yeah.
Or was it
Stock picks or whatever?
Yeah.
He did that. He even
He
started
did that for
before.
like 6 months, dude. And it was funny.
It was good.
Remember he did that stupid thing where he was like, let's pick an altcoin to randomly buy.
Yeah.
And I think he picked SafeMoon, right?
Yeah.
Which is absolute scam.
We need like GWort or someone to start doing that again for us.
Yeah. We need, well, that's what I like about CoinDesk TV is that like there's something live. There's something about live, right? Even when you regularly watch TV.
Yeah.
You just like, that's why, I mean, I don't even like baseball, for example, but in the summer, it's the only real, like, it's one of the only live sports. You get golf, you get some other stuff, tennis.
Yeah.
But I'll just have the game on. At least there's something comforting about knowing that it's happening now. You can always binge watch a Netflix show, but like there's nothing quite like live, or even podcasting, but there's really nothing quite like live, you know?
Especially when you're making mistakes live on TV, because then you kind of hate yourself a little bit. That does happen.
That's true. There's really nothing you can do.
Yeah, it's just...
So,
but I haven't said anything bad.
Yeah.
So I haven't been canceled.
Well, what would you like to see in the Bitcoin media space that doesn't exist yet? Like where?
Yeah. A few thoughts
You're
on
a
that.
media guy. Yeah.
Yeah, the live media space is really interesting right now. I think there could be some space for consolidation. The issue is everyone's in Bitcoin wants to do like independent stuff, and like I do too, so I get it. But it makes it hellish to be able to build something that's like consistent and everyone can go. I think CoinDesk tried to do that, but what's happening with DCG, they just like probably don't have the capital to move forward.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. But either like a mega channel where we put BitBoy and Bankless and Crypto Windy and maybe you together. And then we fill that out into like one giant channel where there's always something on, right? Yeah. And it's just live. We're not indexing anything. Just go.
So would they then run their stuff on their own feeds as recorded, but they would live stream it as they record it?
Yeah, just do like a syndication channel.
It's and like then a Twitch channel.
Yeah, you could do it that way.
Okay,
yeah, I mean, hopefully get a channel 2 or somewhere.
Yeah.
Like it's important enough, I think.
So... And then you had another, what was the idea about the same thing with like the Bitcoin podcast? Yeah. Like run them all on the same day or something?
Bitcoin Radio.
Yeah, Bitcoin Radio.
Bitcoin Radio. So I had this idea last year sometime. I was at Compass thinking of ways to like add more media to the space. And there's always like a new show. Everyone's launching new podcasts, but that's great. What if we just put all these podcasts together and make a radio station out of it? And then we just get some weird libertarian talk show host to like fill in the gaps.
Some charismatic, crazy person.
Yeah. Just an AM show. You broadcast it out of like Nashville or Austin or whatever.
I mean, that's what's nice. AM is cool too because it goes really far. Yeah. And so then what? You'd link up with like the Tales from the Crypt and the what Bitcoin did and get them to like live stream as their something or who knows what. Eventually now you just have this platform so you generate new content as well.
I mean, there's a cool idea here with like Radio Free Europe too.
Yeah.
Where you have like the idea back in the day we're going to broadcast from London or wherever to occupied countries and give them good ideas. Well, we can do the same thing with Bitcoin, right?
It is
Radio
pretty
Free
cool.
Bitcoin.
It is pretty cool with radio that like you can't really stop like radio waves.
Yeah.
It's very easy to like broadcast into occupied territory.
It's really hard to buy a radio station though and get a license with the FCC.
The license and stuff is difficult.
So I did look into it.
So and then let's talk about your background a little bit. So because we've been mentioning this, right? So you do a bunch of media stuff, right? You're a documentarian. I'm aware of.
Aspiring. Yeah.
You're a podcaster. You've been a news reporter. Mm-hmm. How do you get into Bitcoin media and into crypto media?
Yeah, writ large. Similar story with a lot of people. 2013 buddy. I'm just actually putting this together. My little brother's also in crypto.
Yeah.
Is dating this buddy's girlfriend. The girlfriend is his girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
Is this? Wow, I'm really mixing this up. So this guy, his sister, is now dating my brother.
Got it.
Okay, that took a little bit of me to unwork it.
He introduced you to Bitcoin?
Yeah, he was buying weed with it. This is like 2013, which is funny. It's the same year Colorado legalized weed, but we were like 16, so he was doing that with Bitcoin. I was like, what? I don't know
What is this thing?
Yeah, he was a weird guy, and I was like, I don't know. But we became good friends, and now they're dating, or the sister's dating. Yeah.
So you got interested in Bitcoin then. I think that's a common story, right?
Yeah.
Particularly like a Silk Road, or you hear about it, or
Yeah.
the initial. I mean, illicit use was a much bigger percentage of Bitcoin's use case back then.
Onboarding, which like brings us back to BitBoy. He's scamming people, but he is onboarding people, just like weed is running people's minds. That's a side take. We don't have to venture down it. But yeah, I went to college and met a guy named Zach Voll, who super into Bitcoin.
Yep.
He was trading it.
We know Zach.
Yeah, friends of Zach. Zach and I became friends. We were in a frat together. And then
In college?
In college.
Okay.
Yeah, small frat, so no one's going to know about it.
All right,
Just
interesting.
a local chapter.
So you got more interested. You graduated from college.
Yeah, and I was a history major, and I was like, I don't know what to do with this. So the school had like a really strong pipeline to DC for journalism, and I was like, I don't know what to do with this, but I will be a history major and go to DC. And I went to a DC hearing. It was Brad Sherman talking about Bitcoin in 2018.
One of my favorite antagonists ever.
Yeah. And I was like,
we've played many clips from him on
you
this
should
show.
have him on this show, honestly.
I would love to have Brad Sherman, Congressman, come here from D.C. or California, your district, sir. We'd love to have you on.
Yeah, pencil neck shift and him on the show. He was just blasting Bitcoin in 2018. Like the whole argument was laid out during this 10-minute hearing I saw. It was like, Bitcoin is alternative currency. It's used by people we don't want. Like, and it's going to subvert the dollar one day.
Yeah.
And immediately I was just like interested in it because that didn't make sense to me. I was like, I knew it from 2013 when my buddy was buying drugs.
Yeah, but you're like, it's this big a deal now? The guy's so mad?
The guy's in Congress talking about it. So I wrote it up, talked to Zach about it more, and then by next 6 months from there, I was working at Masari.
Yep.
Just working on their little news desk.
A lot of people came through Masari. They have had a huge research team there over the years. And yeah.
Well, early days. I was first 15 there.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. So we built a little news desk, and then from there was a pipeline from Masari to CoinDesk because Ryan Selkis used to be at CoinDesk.
Right.
And so
That's true.
CoinDesk would try to poach people.
Oh, so there's a little battle back there.
Yeah. So I landed with Pete Rizzo at CoinDesk for a little bit.
So you worked for Pete when he was an editor there?
Just a short amount of time.
Got it.
Yeah, just for a little bit. But
and then you've been part-time, I suppose, at CoinDesk since then.
Yeah, so I mainly wrote about DeFi and Ethereum at CoinDesk, mostly technical stuff because that's just what I gravitate towards, just finding more interesting than just like talking about Bitcoin going up. And so I always like try to find those people, get deep into those chats on Discord, start meeting those people very quickly. I think that's a great thing about the entire space is like you can get access to Vitalik at some point if you just stick around long enough. Not because like you have something to pitch him, but just because like he might be interested in talking with you or interested in bouncing ideas off each other. So you just stick around long enough and that's what you find out. So I did that, and then I really just wanted to join a Bitcoin startup because I realized after being in media for quite a while, this is probably the biggest critique I have of media in general, is these people are not interacting with it at all, right? Like they might be somewhat practitioners, they might not. They might know how to use MetaMask, but that's about where the limit
I mean, particularly on the news side?
News media and crypto is often awful because they don't use things and they haven't been through it. So with startups, I wanted to join a Bitcoin startup because I wanted to see like how tough it is, because we'd always get in these pitches from people that are like desperately trying to get attention for their product. And then we'd also go turn around and bash companies for failing. Mm-hmm. We're like, okay, there has to be more than this, than me just like being able to bash you in 500 words and hurt your guys' revenue for a year. So I went and tried to find a Bitcoin startup to join, and that was Compass at the time, which was like the hot startup in 2021.
Yep.
And that was a ride. So.
Okay, so you went to Compass Mining, which was like, what would you call it? It's not cloud mining. It's
that's rude.
Miner hosting?
It's not cloud mining.
No, it's like hosted mining for retail?
For people who don't know the mining space, right, you have this box. In this box, you plug it into a wall.
I think our
No.
audience.
They know that.
Okay.
I'm going to make it. You plug it into the wall and you get money out of it. But there's like a billion different ways you can divvy this up into like business schemes, right?
Yep.
And so you can do like, I'm going to be a public company, or you can do like a private company and do like a rev share with it. You can be a private company and just stream sats to people. Or the idea with Compass is I can have someone purchase this box and then they get the stats from it and we just manage it.
Yep.
And so all these different ways, like they're legal and illegal, just depending on how you look at it.
And the profitable or successful or not. It's been tried many ways, right?
Mostly unprofitable, but some are profitable.
Well, I mean, it's just been it's been a pretty bleak situation for Bitcoin miners for the last 18 months.
Yeah, it's been pretty bad. I mean, they had good times though, right? There's some yacht parties and we enjoyed them.
So let's talk about mining just generally. We don't have to talk more about Compass specifically, but what gets you excited about Bitcoin mining in general? Why?
Yeah.
After writing about DeFi primarily, being a news reporter, covering crypto, what made you gravitate specifically to Bitcoin mining?
No, I get tons of, I can't curse on the show, but I get a lot of lashback or pushback from people in DeFi and Ethereum who are like, why didn't you join and do this stuff? Part of me wishes I had, but for the main part here, like mining is extremely interesting because of the people involved, less so because of the tech. The tech's not changing day to day, right? It's just like, here's a hardware box. Maybe there's some firmware. Maybe we do something on the energy side. It's a little bit different. But the people at its core are extremely interesting. They're odd. They're egotistical. They're loud. I think they're just like often Americans is who I deal with. But then also you get some like people coming in from China or Kazakhstan, talking with some Kazakhstan miners later today, right? Like people you'd never interact with typically in other parts of crypto. And you also get to go to some of the weirdest places, right? So for you guys, going down to Spur, Texas.
Yeah, we have a big site in Texas, Helios.
There's 800 people there.
It's great. In the whole town, you mean?
In the whole town, there's 800 people. Some of them have been there since the 1880s. Some of them are transplants who just want to move into tiny homes because it's also the tiny home capital of the United States. And they all work at a Bitcoin mine, you know? And these people are just fascinating to talk to. And so that's what I care about. You got these energy guys, you got digital wildcatters, like you got these oil guys involved as well. Just the people you pick up on the scene. And I think a lot of people don't like mining because they don't like tech nerds who are specifically into hardware. And people feel uncomfortable with that. And I can understand that to a degree, but I think once you like sort of peel back the layer, you do get one of the most interesting parts of crypto that people just overlook. And at the end of the day, like I always like to say, money is social. Like there's a social level to it. And that's why podcasting and stuff like that matters, right?
Yep.
So mining, I think, presents an opportunity to speak to people who otherwise would not care about Bitcoin at all.
That's so interesting. So you love the story and the people the most.
Mm-hmm.
It is. I mean, especially if we step back and consider the entire like crypto world. I mean, Bitcoin mining is nothing like smart contract developing.
Completely
different. So far apart. And it's different culturally, extremely different culturally.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's a heavy energy business primarily, right?
Yeah.
It's like really fascinating stuff. I like it too. So then when we talked about mining, one of the things that's been a big story this year has been the rise of ordinals, which have generated a lot more fees for Bitcoin miners. Most Bitcoin miners, thus, are supportive of ordinals. Many Bitcoin maximalists have been in opposition to ordinals for a variety of reasons. What's your take on ordinals overall?
I'm a huge ordinals fan. Like once I saw it, I was like, this is great. So I'm not a huge NFT guy except for the pudgy penguins. I think the pudgy penguins are awesome.
Specifically the penguins?
Yeah, the penguins are cute. Besides that,
we have a guy here, Steve Kurz. He loves the penguins.
Yeah,
I think we talked about that on this podcast briefly.
He's got good taste. Was not a huge fan of NFT space, and like during that whole run, was like pretty critical of it for my perch and venue on CoinDesk and elsewhere.
Yeah,
ordinals make sense. I like Pete Rizzo's position here that Casey Rodemore and the ordinals team saw something in Bitcoin that was always there, but they were able to innovate on top of, and they made something out of what was a pre-existing project, as opposed to other projects out there, which they see something their project can do, and so they go and change their product in order to make it fit the product they want at the end. Bitcoin didn't have to do that, right? Bitcoin already had this, and so Casey and the ordinal team members went and just slightly changed like the perspective of how we look at Bitcoin, so we can have a new product. And that's been awesome for miners who I think like this year's fees are up like 5% to comparatively to 1% for transaction fees.
Oh yeah, I mean as a percentage of total block reward. Total miner revenue. Yeah. I mean, I think it's fair to say fees have like 5 or 10x'd from like in absolute terms I mean, even now, I was looking earlier, and like, I mean, the block clock behind me is only going to show the price. That's just how we have it set up. But I mean, right now, like the average fee is 25 sats per VByte. It's what you should probably pay if you want to get in like the next couple blocks. That's a lot. And we went through a giant multi-year period of literally almost zero fees, 1 sat per VByte, which I wrote a report about. Why are Bitcoin fees so low? So yes, it's good for miners like it because they get paid more. But what else? What do you think about its interaction, or what's it bringing? How's it affecting Bitcoin culture?
Ooh, Bitcoin culture. Well, I think a lot of those people gave up really quickly. Like some of these maximalists sort of pushed back initially. So the first one I think is Pierre Rochard with the Bitcoin saving account, right? He's tweeting against it, and then within 72 hours, just sort of like put his hands up and was like,
whatever. Yeah.
I think like within Bitcoin culture, there's like that conservative mindset, which a lot of people, they are conservatives in the first place or countercultural as being conservative. Then they came to Bitcoin and they apply that same mindset, as opposed to coming to Bitcoin, seeing it's a conservative play versus other protocols, and then becoming conservative themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's like a net negative for the space because we look at Bitcoin from the wrong perspective. We're looking at it from a pre-existing perspective of like our political beliefs that were ingrained beforehand, instead of looking at Bitcoin, the promise of it, and how we can build on top of it.
What about the argument, though, that like this, well, there's a variety of arguments, but in this part, what about protocol conservatism that is not necessarily generated from a political belief, but is engendered by the fear that, that we move too quickly, we create bugs, that Bitcoin should move slow, and this introduces a whole bunch of like weird like economic incentives, could even result in new types of MEV on Bitcoin, and that's why we're opposed to it. Does any of that ring true?
I like that perspective. I actually agree with it because I think like Bitcoin, we want to stay very simple. We have Ethereum to do like sort of the crazy stuff on top of, and there's even other chains we can go even more crazy on top of. At the same time, though, most of the people, if you look at like their political beliefs or how they look at the world around it, they apply that same mindset to Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
So take, for example, I'm blanking on his name all of a sudden, Bitcoin core developer, Luke Dasher, right? Like famously Catholic.
Yep.
Not saying like I'm a Christian myself.
Famously conservative guy.
Famously conservative. Like I'm a Christian myself, so nothing against any of that. But the point being here, like he is so conservative in his own ways, and he sticks with it in the Bitcoin sense. And you can go through a lot of these other Bitcoiners who view life the same way. A lot of these people who are down in Austin and elsewhere, like looking at Bitcoin in a certain lens, and their life mirrors that, right? Like the meat movement or whatever in Bitcoin didn't take off because of just Bitcoin.
Right.
They liked it beforehand. They liked all that stuff beforehand. They were into it. Like if Bitcoin exists or not, they were still going to be like into that sort of thing. So I think we do a disservice to ourselves, and at the same time, we're losing the ability to build really awesome stuff. A lot of like stablecoin stuff was on Bitcoin before, right?
Yeah.
These things were built on Bitcoin, but they moved to Ethereum and now Tron, and we've lost all of it.
Yeah.
And, Justin Sun just rakes in the fees.
I do like having a space for more experimental development on Bitcoin, and I think ordinals have definitely brought that. What do you think about ordinal theory? I mean, this is where I get a little sticky. I love inscriptions.
Yeah.
I love the idea that we can etch stuff into Bitcoin, the stone tablet that is Bitcoin's blockchain. By far, in my opinion, the most immutable and long-lasting blockchain. But then to tokenize them with this totally off-chain protocol, which is a hack. I mean, Casey says this is a hack, right?
Yeah.
We hacked it together. Obviously, the protocol consensus layer is unaware of the ordinals. Does that cap the possibilities here? Because Ethereum's purpose built for tokens. It's great for tokens. It has standards for tokens. This is just a bunch of people having what do you say to the idea that this is a bunch of people having a collective hallucination, essentially?
No, there's something to that. I know a lot of the key ordinal people, and they're basically throwing a lot of stuff at the wall right now and seeing what sticks. And props to them. And if they have money to do it, do it. That's actually how most of Ethereum happened too, right? So like the OpenSea guys, I remember talking to them in 2019. There was a bug on the early version of OpenSea, and I was talking about that with them, and I was like, why am I writing this? This is stupid. Who cares about OpenSea?
Yeah,
2 years later, it's the biggest protocol out there.
I know. I remember this, and even earlier in 17, CryptoKitties,
Yeah.
17, but then like 18, I was doing venture investing and talked to someone who's big on digital collectibles. And I'm like, this sounds like the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Actually, I didn't even pass that negative of judgment. I was like, it's stupid because like this can't be real. Like this is not a thing, right?
Yeah.
And then of course it became absolutely massive.
Yeah.
I mean, NFTs even now, I mean, if you by most metrics, if you look at like trade volume or like count of transfers and stuff, they're down like bad. It's like down over 90%.
Yeah.
But like the core OG collections, CryptoPunks, the like squiggles, right? All the stuff and all the AI generated stuff. Even Yuga, which I'm not really a fan of Yuga Labs and their collections, but like they're holding plenty of value.
Yeah.
A lot of people like them.
Yeah.
I'm pretty certain NFTs are here to stay. That this isn't,
Yeah.
But it absolutely mooned.
Yeah.
Absolutely mooned.
It did. And if you look at Ethereum over the years, and a lot of maximalists hate looking at this chart, they pick one and they're like, oh, look, this chart went up and down and no one cares about it anymore. But if you stack all these things over the years, Ethereum is accruing like this value. So go back, ICO era, moon up and down, but then there's like that 10% market for it. And then we have stable coins, and then you add DeFi, and then you add NFTs. And over years, we're just accruing more things that are actually driving a purpose for this chain in the first place.
Right.
And yeah, everything went up and down 90%, but you still have that base. We're not getting that with Bitcoin. Like we could have it with stable coins. Hopefully ordinals and inscriptions develop into that. But it's a loss. And it's a loss for miners as well, which are looking pretty bleak without an increase to the price of Bitcoin and then also very low transaction fees. So I know a lot of miners who are very concerned about this and actively thinking of things like drive chains.
Well, particularly with the halving coming up in maybe like 9 months or so.
Yeah.
How are miners preparing for the halving? And are they worried?
Oh, it's bad.
Yeah?
It's very bad. So unless you're a public miner, specifically in the United States with access to high amounts of capital at lower interest rates or just dilution, you're in a bad spot if you have not been upgrading your fleet and getting some of these energy purchases squared away. A lot of the companies from 2020, 2021, they focused on getting ahead of the bull market, and they purchased these energy contracts, which are now 3 cents more expensive than they were back then, just to give like an estimate. And a lot of those machines had to be upgraded by now. If you're buying an S19 in 2020, 90 terahash with the efficiency, probably don't want that in your rack come halving. Like maybe if you have some firmware adoption for it or immersion, but you're really going to want to be moving to these higher level like XPs and things like that,
right? Like, what's the highest end like that's out from Antminer now? Like,
XP is probably like the most efficient. It's like 21 joules per terahash.
And we're talking about like how many terahashes per, like 140 or so?
Yeah.
Ish?
Yeah.
So it's a lot more hash, and it's also better, more efficient.
Yeah.
So it's like,
and that's what you're competing against. So the likes of some of these bigger guys like Marathon,
right? They can buy them, keep the new machines flowing in.
They can dilute their shareholders like crazy, and if they do it in a responsible way, shareholders are not going to be that upset because if you time the purchase of your machines and your equipment,
you turn them on, and then
with your dilution,
you pay for it with equity, but you also increase your hash rate, and that can boost your revenue. And it's going to be tricky, right? I mean, the halving is an important event, and you're right. So connecting this to ordinals, right? What we're talking about is we like the increased demand for Bitcoin block space from these people willing to pay to do whatever it is they're doing, whether it's NFTs or these tokens or whatever on Bitcoin, because that revenue goes to miners. And do you think? Let's ask the big question: is the security budget a long-term concern for Bitcoin, the network?
I really want to say no. Like I really want to say no. I think it is though. I think that it might be the wrong question in the sense that like, why should it even be the question we're asking when we have things we can do with Bitcoin that are decently safe, and we choose not to do them? We choose not to see if we can bring stable coins on the Bitcoin or add more interest for ordinals and
You mean drive demand to increase
drive demand
fees,
towards Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Instead, we We do stuff with Lightning, which Lightning
kind of
is
drive
great.
demand away from Bitcoin on those types of use cases, stables, tokenization, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, like you can't even sell Bitcoin on Swan, right? So like we can't even like
I think you
accrue
can now,
value.
right? I don't think that's true anymore.
Did they change that?
I'm not sure, but they didn't even used to have that button, which is you got to hand it to them. That's funny.
Yeah, which is like, it is funny, and I like the HODL model. It's great.
Rhymes.
HODL model's fine.
Yeah.
But you're not helping miners out.
That's true.
You're not helping these
You got
guys
to use
out.
the blockchain in order to help miners.
And that's cool when you go, like, you download Unisat or one of these other things, and you can just start using this stuff. Like, you can go and buy an inscription, and then there's going to be recursive inscriptions as well.
I saw this. This is like inscriptions that refer to each other inscriptions.
So cool. Yeah, it's inscriptions that speak to as many inscriptions I understand as you want that are on different blocks, and that allows you to build out more data on chain. So like
More complex data arrangements.
yeah.
So like beyond the like the Taproot wizard that when they ripped a 4 megger, that's what they call it, ripping a 4 megger.
Yeah, that's
right.
gross.
I mean, theoretically, if you fill up the entire block, you've got 4 megabytes of data availability, and that's it.
Yeah.
And here you can now
Just keep building
roll out your
stuff.
data across multiple blocks, and then use something to tie it all back together.
Yeah, and then that's just one idea. Like Bitmap, I think you guys have talked about that as well.
Yeah.
Like the idea of what if we just like layer on top of the world some sort of grid and then use Satoshis to like represent that idea, and then we can do like Satoshi trails. Go do like a map on chain.
It's pretty
in
weird
the real world.
and interesting.
Yeah.
Some people were complaining. One of the original complaints that I remember hearing was that it would harm Bitcoin's fungibility.
Yeah.
Because now you've got a bunch of sats that are encumbered with this other data. They're not being used as money. It's kind of like if you, I guess the argument would be like if it's dollar bills, people write on dollar bills all the time, and they typically hold their fungibility unless you destroy it.
Yeah.
But it'd be like if famous people signed dollar bills or like a famous artist did genuine art, that dollar bill would now be worth a lot more than $1, which would make it not fungible with other dollars. And that's something they've been worried about ordinals. We didn't see any risk of this because, like, even under aggressive growth scenarios, like it's each ordinal is one sat with 9,999 sats attached to it for postage to make it easy to move around, like later, and like even I forget what we said. Even with like 500 million ordinals, it'll be like it's like 50,000 Bitcoin total.
Yeah.
Which is like, a tiny percentage of the total supply. But I don't know. Does that, I mean, the other thing people say is like, that's just not what Bitcoin's meant to be used for. Bitcoin's supposed to be money. Why are you putting monkey JPEGs on the chain?
Well, I guess it doesn't really matter. It's like, it's going to happen no matter what. Like, unless they figure out some way of.
Yeah.
What was the node thing they're doing? The ordinal disrespector?
Or disrespector.
Yeah.
It's just a node that doesn't download the,
it
like
doesn't
download the ordinals.
Project.
Yeah.
That guy probably got a lot of Twitter followers out of it, but didn't do anything.
Yeah, it's stupid. I think that stuff's stupid.
I mean, to like the fungibility question, Bitcoin and privacy sucks already. Like, go and download Samurai or whatever. Like, you can do it, and there's ways of doing it. And hats off to those guys for trying. But it's just annoying.
Yeah.
And frustrating. Like, Tornado Cash, those sort of things were a better experience, and those things are getting pushed against. So I think if the government really cared, they'd do something about it. That's how bad the UX is on those. And then on top of that, for the ordinals, like, I don't really care if it's like if it has something on it. I'm still going to spend that sat if I want, and if I can purchase it or sell it for more because there's some inscription, that's also awesome.
Right.
And then the last part of it, there's always been these Bitcoin services going back for years now that have labeled Bitcoin somehow.
Right. There was like green Bitcoin or
Yeah.
they used to say they called it virgin Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So Bitcoin right out of a block that was just mined has no transaction history.
And there's people who try to sell it, right? Like, I want to sell you these green Bitcoin or these virgin Bitcoin. That didn't really catch on.
Right. I never actually caught a huge market for it, but the labeling had existed.
The labeling does exist for people who are buying and selling Bitcoin for exchanges and for other people. They know where Bitcoin have come from. That's always going to exist.
Yeah.
So, like, I think we're just kidding ourselves if we could say, like, it matters or not.
What else gets you excited about Bitcoin mining and Bitcoin in general before we wrap here, Will?
For me, I think it's mostly I see stuff through a media lens. Like, again, that money is social idea. Nick Carter and Udi Wertheimer were making jokes a lot about podcasters lately.
Yeah.
And I love that because I think it's hilarious. That funny enough, they were making it on the Bankless show, which is just like they're talking with two podcasters about how much they hate podcasting. And Nick has his own podcast. Udi has been like
on every podcast. He's been on this podcast.
And so like
this is his wizard hat right here.
Oh, there we go. Wow.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, Udi has used a lot of different social platforms to build himself up, right? He had that pro Ethereum channel, which was an anti-Ethereum channel for a while.
Yeah. And then he had
Twitter.
have fun staying poor. He had a giant Telegram group centered around that joke.
Yeah. And so like I totally agree with them in the sense that I think they were actually meaning it. So I'm taking a little bit of a liberal interpretation of what they're saying.
Yeah.
I think there's been a poor use of independent media in the space. I think the CoinDesks, the Blocks of the world are doing as best they can under the corporate structure they have to create themselves within. They have to act within a newsroom. Mm-hmm. But for the independent media out there, whether that's like a large Twitter account to an independent podcaster, oftentimes it's just the same old, we want attention. And that's taken the form of token shilling all the way to bad faith arguments that attack other people. And for me in this mining spot, we have hard numbers. We have 20 plus public companies that give us monthly data on how much they're exercising their Bitcoin mining operations, how much flows they're getting, how much they're selling. So for the first time, we can sort of create a blueprint for what an independent media source in Bitcoin should look like. And that's what gets me excited. Like I can build something around that because there is somewhat a structure already, and I can present that to people with integrity, as opposed to the past where it's just been like, oh, this is my opinion and I'm going to attack you because I like Bitcoin.
I love it. Will Foxley, formerly Compass Mining, at CoinDesk still. Excited to see what you're doing next, man. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Alex.
That's it for this week's episode of Galaxy Brains. Thanks to our guest, Will Foxley, the host of the Mining Pod, formerly of Compass Mining, and our friend Beimnet Abebe from Galaxy Trading, as always, for the good conversation about markets. That's all we have. Have a great weekend. Thanks for listening to Galaxy Brains, the weekly podcast from Galaxy Research. If you enjoy the show, please like, rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. To follow Galaxy Research, sign up for our weekly newsletter at gdr.email, read our content at galaxy.com/research, and follow us on Twitter at GLXY Research. See you next week.